before armies, before nations, before iron, bronze, or even fire. There was already murder. The first weapon ever used wasn't forged in a furnace or sharpened by a blacksmith. It was picked up off the ground, a rock, a bone. Whatever was within reach when something, or someone, needed to die. We like to think of violence as a side effect of civilization, something that came with greed, politics, borders, and power. But the archaeological record tells a different story. Weapons didn't follow civilization. They came first, and what humans did with them across the next 3 million years is one of the darkest, most relentless stories in history. The oldest confirmed weapons aren't even recognizably weapons at first glance. They're rocks. But not just any rocks, specifically shaped ones. Around 3.3 million years ago, hominins in what is now Kenya were deliberately knapping stone, striking one rock against another to create a sharp edge. These are called Oldowan tools, named after Olduvai Gorge in Tanzania, where early examples were found. We can't say with certainty these were used to kill other hominins, but we know they were used to butcher large animals, because the cut marks are still visible on fossilized bones. Whatever early humans were, they were not gentle. Then, around 500,000 years ago, something shifts. Rocks become spears. Specifically, rocks get hafted, attached to wooden handles, dramatically extending reach and multiplying force. You're no longer bashing, you're thrusting. Hunting at range becomes possible, and so does killing from a distance, which changes everything. There's something psychologically significant about the spear that rarely gets discussed. When you kill something with a rock, you are close. You feel it. You see every detail, the body, the resistance, the moment it ends. It is intimate and traumatic and visceral. The spear introduces distance, and distance, it turns out, is the most important psychological innovation in the history of weapons. It lets you kill without the full weight of what killing feels like. Every major weapons development in human history is essentially a continuation of this logic. Push the kill further away. Spear, bow, cannon, rifle, drone. The weapon changes. The principle doesn't. The earliest confirmed wooden spear is the Schöningen spear, found in Germany, roughly 300,000 years old. It's nearly 2.5 meters long, aerodynamically shaped, clearly designed for throwing. Whoever made it understood physics well enough to taper the weight toward the front for better flight. This wasn't improvised, it was engineered. The bow and arrow is where weapons become something close to magic. The earliest definitive evidence of bow use dates to around 64,000 years ago in South Africa, tiny stone points called microliths, too small to be spear tips but perfectly sized for arrowheads, found at Sibidu Cave. Think about what the bow actually does. It stores energy mechanically in the bent limb and releases it faster than any human muscle can. An arrow in flight is essentially invisible. You can kill something 50 meters away before it even knows you're there. For the first time in history, the weapon and the weapon user are completely separated in the mind of the target. You don't see who's killing you. You don't know where it came from. You just die. Militarily, this is devastating. Psychologically, for the person holding the bow, it removes even more of the intimacy of killing. The target is small, far away, abstract. Armies that mastered archery, the Mongols, the English longbowmen at Agincourt, the Persian immortals, didn't just win battles. They ended them before they properly started. But distance isn't always the point. The blade, the knife, the sword, the dagger, is a weapon that specifically rejects distance. It pulls the violence back, in close. And cultures across history have consistently treated bladed weapons as more honorable, more personal, and more meaningful than projectile weapons. The earliest known blades are obsidian, volcanic glass, which fractures into edges sharper than modern surgical steel. Edges so fine they can slice individual cells. Obsidian blades were being used in Anatolia, modern Turkey, as far back as 700,000 years ago, though their use as dedicated weapons solidifies in the Stone Age. Bronze changed everything. Around 3,300 BCE in the Near East, humans figured out that melting copper and tin together created an alloy stronger than either metal alone. You could now cast blades in any shape you wanted, longer, thinner, with a point, with a fuller groove to reduce weight without losing strength. The first swords appear around 1700 BCE in the Aegean, long enough to thrust, heavy enough to slash. And from that point forward, the sword becomes something beyond a tool. It becomes a symbol of status, of power, of identity. Kings are buried with them. Gods are depicted holding them. Knights swear oaths on them. The weapon designed for killing becomes the object civilization builds mythology around. For most of human history, if you couldn't get through the walls, you lost. Walls were the great equalizer. A small garrison behind good stone could hold off a force 10 times its size indefinitely, as long as supplies held. So the logical response was to build weapons specifically designed to destroy walls. The battering ram appears around 900 BCE in Assyrian military records. A massive bronze-headed beam suspended in a wheeled frame swung repeatedly against gates and walls until something gave. The catapult, invented in Greece around 400 BCE, could hurl stones weighing 150 kilograms over 300 meters. But the Romans refined it into something grimmer. The onager, which didn't just throw rocks. It could throw diseased animal carcasses over walls into besieged cities, contaminating water supplies and spreading plague deliberately. The first known use of biological warfare launched by a siege engine. The trebuchet, perfected in medieval Europe around the 12th century, was even more powerful, capable of throwing a 200-kilogram stone with enough force to shatter battlements. At the Siege of Stirling in 1304, Edward I of England built a trebuchet so enormous it required 30 wagons to transport. He named it Warwolf. He refused a Scottish surrender offer specifically so he could test it. He waited. He fired. Then he accepted the surrender. Everything changes in 9th century China. Taoist alchemists, searching for an elixir of immortality, accidentally mixed charcoal, sulfur, and potassium nitrate. The mixture exploded. They called it huo yao, fire medicine. It was not, they noted in their writings, suitable for an elixir of immortality. It was, however, suitable for something else entirely. The Chinese military had gunpowder weapons by the 10th century, fire arrows, explosive bombs, early flamethrowers. By the 13th century, they had protoguns, metal tubes that directed the explosion forward through a projectile. When gunpowder reached Europe in the 14th century via the Silk Road, it didn't just add a new weapon to the arsenal. It made most existing weapons obsolete almost overnight. Arrows couldn't penetrate plate armor, but a musket ball could. Castle walls that had stood for centuries crumbled under cannon fire in hours. Knights who had spent lifetimes and fortunes mastering mounted combat became irrelevant in a generation. The entire medieval social order, built on the assumption that superior arms and training produced superior warriors, collapsed because now a peasant with 6 weeks of musket training could kill a knight in full armor at 50 meters. Gunpowder didn't just change warfare, it changed who had power and why. Look at the full arc: rock, spear, bow, blade, siege engine, gunpowder. Every single step follows the same logic: more force, more range, more lethality, less personal exposure for the user. Each development doesn't just make killing easier, it changes the psychological relationship between the killer and the act of killing. The person launching a trebuchet doesn't see the face of who dies when the stone lands. The archer at Agincourt doesn't know which arrow found which man. The musketeer behind the smoke doesn't watch his target fall. We engineered the humanity out of violence piece by piece across 3 million years, and each time we did, we found it easier to scale up. To kill not one enemy, but hundreds. Not hundreds, but thousands. Not soldiers, but entire cities. The weapon didn't make us violent. We were already that. What weapons did was make violence feel like something other than what it is. The first weapon was a rock in a hand, and the intention behind it was exactly the same as the intention behind every weapon that came after. The only thing that changed was the distance and the scale, and how easy it became to forget what was actually happening at the other end.